Sushma Maharaj, and I'm a partner in the energy team at Shakepeare Martinez. And we are thrilled to be sponsoring and participating this event, which of course features all of you, prominent leaders and pioneers in the housing construction industry. So first, I'm going to tell you a bit about Shakepeare Martinez, and then I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that you as housing professionals are facing and potentially how some of these can be mitigated. So first of all, who is Shakepeare Martinez and on what kind of work, what sort of work do we do? So we are a full service law firm. And we provide legal services to businesses, organizations, and government departments. And so we advise on large-scale residential and commercial schemes and later living housing projects, large infrastructure, national infrastructure projects, and we advise on all sorts of energy generation, energy supply, building out the connections from housing developments to the public networks, so that be water, gas, electricity, telecoms, district heating networks. And we're also doing a lot of work now in the low emission vehicle space, which includes the supply of electric vehicles charging infrastructure. So who are our clients? These are some of the clients that we advise. So they're residential developers, commercial developers, registered providers, energy utility and landowners. And I just thought I'd kind of include all of the sort of interesting people we're advising at the moment, or have in the past. So there's a list of all of our clients there. So back to the task in hand. So what are some of the challenges that are currently being faced by housing professionals? So I guess the first one is policy changes, which is, of course, leading to much uncertainty and making it quite difficult for house builders to plan. So we know that in June 2019, the UK became the first major economy in the world to pass laws to end its contribution to global warming by 2050, or net zero by 2050. And this means that any emissions would need to be balanced by schemes to offset an equivalent amount of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And then in December 2020, the UK published its energy white paper, and this set out the government's agenda for the energy sector and its role in tackling climate change, and really set a course for achieving the 2050 net zero targets. And the energy white paper talked about the electrification of heat by the rollout of heat pumps, an increase in low carbon heat networks, development of heat network zones, and use of green gas and hydrogen in the gas grid. And what we know is that the energy paper also referred to many other papers and strategies, which of course have yet to be published. So we are all eagerly awaiting, I'm sure, the heat and building strategy. And it also talked about a strategy for regulating electric vehicles and a hydrogen strategy. And so there's a lot of uncertainty for house builders as to how all of this is really going to work. Will there be changes to planning regulations, for example, to mandate their developments to connect to a heat network zone? What proportion of the country will be kept warm by electricity, so via the electric heat pumps? Or what proportion will be kept warm by hydrogen? And how will these two different systems and different costs and characteristics be sold to the public? We're hoping that the heat and building strategy will give answers to all of these and therefore allow the industry to focus on delivery. But, you know, we're still kind of watching this space. So that's policy changes. And we also have a lot of uncertainty in respect of legal and regulatory changes. So we've just talked about changes to the buildings regulations brought in by the Future Home Standards. We know that the government, as Richard just said, is going to update the building regulations this year to ensure that new homes produce 31% less carbon emissions compared to current standards, and that the government will consult about the technical aspects on the Future Home Standards before updating the buildings regulations again to come in force in 2025. and that no new homes will be built with fossil fuel heating or gas boilers from 2025. So, and there's also been the creation of a new homes ombudsman following complaints about the quality of new build homes. And it is anticipated that the ombudsman would enforce higher standards on the housing sector. So all of these changes will lead to a shift to homes powered by lower carbon solutions and the electrification of heat. But there are also going to be changes as how heat networks are regulated, and changes to the requirements to obtain electricity licenses, which will invariably impact house builders, and of course, which they'll need to consider when planning renewable energy solutions at their sites. So that takes us through policy changes, legal and regulatory changes. And of course, you're going to have to consider all of this as you decide how you are going to make cost-effective and affordable housing that consumers want, but also that will allow you to make a decent profit. And the added challenge in all of this is post-pandemic working arrangements and how we live post-pandemic would be very different. So most of us would probably want to work from home. So that's another challenge where house builders will have to design houses that would accommodate our changed needs post-pandemic. And added to that, of course, we've got labour shortages following Brexit. And whilst people have relocated to their home countries, and then there's sort of immigration issues such as work permits, but also we need to think about where we have homes that are currently run on gas boilers or electricity, transitioning to homes being run, say, via electric heat pumps, or in a hydrogen zone, or in a heat network zone. We kind of have sort of plumbers who fit boilers now and electricians who do electric. But I can see in the future there is a kind of pressing need for a more holistic approach where we have something like a low carbon technician who looks at home heating as a whole, and looking at, heat pump with insulation, and also educating, house owners and house builders to think about homes in a different way. And also being able to kind of advise on what grants, etc., are available to the person who's going to be owning that home. So lots to think about, including supply chain. The previous speaker, Colette, was talking about how things are getting more expensive and getting in things from Europe, and delays as well. But also added to that is the need to deliver increased biodiversity, that would be covered by our upcoming environmental bill, which may institute changes to planning regulations to make diversity net gain mandatory. So that means that house builders would be obliged to leave the local environment in better shape than they left it, guaranteed for 10 years. And that's by creating additional sort of wildlife habitats, either on or off the development. And, this could also lead to construction delays. It's all looking like we should give up now, I hear you saying, because there's also changes to the planning regime. And of course, we have the challenges of availability and cost of viable land, and availability and cost of finance. So before we all give up, how can some of these challenges actually be mitigated? And I think one way of kind of mitigating this is, we have to kind of do a lot of work at the beginning stage, and look at design really for, look at things really at the design stage, and work towards designing a sustainable and cost-effective solution for any development. So, for example, if you're using a heat pump, considering what building fabric is required, and even kind of potentially how you offset these sort of potentially higher electricity costs. For example, the installation of solar panels and a battery, and entering into, a managed services agreement with an asset optimizer who would take responsibility for buying electricity for the site, when the electricity is less expensive, storing it in a battery and selling it to residents when electricity is expensive. So you've got the battery, you've got the electricity in the battery, and so residents could have the benefit of cheaper electricity because it's not being bought off the grid. So design and thinking about all the different parts that go into an energy renewable system and how those costs can be offset would be one way of mitigating these challenges of, increased electricity costs because of the electrification of heat. So running on electricity rather than on gas. A second way of mitigating some of the challenges that house builders would face is sort of innovation, the use more of 3D printing and modular construction to boost homes production. And I guess that will also compensate for labour shortages. And on the diversity or biodiversity side, kind of looking at different ways in which this can be increased. So it might be sort of special bricks also that would provide nesting points for birds, and nature-friendly kind of lighting, and setting up things like hedgehog highways and bat boxes and things. And just generally better site planning, to see how we can reduce vehicle usage and reduce carbon emissions and waste. Increased proportion of new timber frame houses as well would lower carbon emissions. I think gas is probably set to become more expensive, which will help people think about, well, if I can, kind of buy a home in a development which is going to be good for the planet, and it's only marginally more expensive to run than gas, why shouldn't I do that? And we think in the future this is really going to happen, because at the moment, with gas being less expensive than electricity, that's probably going to change through the launch of the green gas levy, which is going to make gas more expensive and will fund support for green gas injection into the gas grid. If we had a more kind of clarity around the planning system, that would also help matters enormously, because at the moment we don't really know how planning and how the government's mapping of heat network zones around the country, and also where these hydrogen hubs are going to be. I'm hoping that the heat and building strategy would give more clarity on that, so that developers would know, well, look, am I in a heat network zone? Maybe I can plan to connect up my development to a heat network, or, am I going to be in a sort of hydrogen hub? And then, I'll be in my development, I'll have sort of hydrogen boilers hooked up to, instead of getting gas off the grid, I'll be getting hydrogen or green gas off the grid. And so that is a way that I can transition these developments or the developments I'm doing to a more net zero target. And also we're looking, what would also help is clarity around funding products. It may be in the future, and I guess the industry has got to come up with this, the finance industry, as all of this comes to the fore towards 2050, is developing kind of green finance products, so green mortgages or lower interest rates for purchasing a green home, stamp duty rebates, maybe lower rates of stamp duty for green homes, maybe less council tax. And this could all in turn lead to more people wanting to then buy green homes, and that kind of leading to more available and cheaper financing for developers developing green homes. So, lots and lots and lots to think about. I thought I might just give you on this slide how you can access our Zero Homes checklist at Shakepeare Martinez. If you go to our green energy page and follow these steps, it will take you. And what we've done is we've set out, if you're a developer, in a pictorial view, some of the things you ought to be thinking about as you plan renewable energy solutions for your development. And so that might be helpful for you and your team. So have a look at that. And any questions that you may have, please feel free to email me at this email address. Or if you had any questions on the checklist as well, please feel free to email me. And as I say, we've been absolutely thrilled to be sponsoring this event, and I'm sure it'll be useful to all of you. And we look forward to hearing from you.